Here we are. We're started at the last session of the summit. Technically, Clay is last after me, but I guess I'm the only one with the last link. So I will kick it off for myself and my colleague, David. So my name is Michael James. You may have seen me on camera yesterday during the sponsor panel. But today I'm going to talk more about Bridge USA, about summer travel, about the summer travel program in 2020, and how that compared to 2019, and then looking forward into 2021. After me, about continuing engagement with program alumni. So let's get into it. Let me share my screen here. One second while my computer processes. Apologies if you're just watching me stare at a screen because I'm waiting for my computer to move. Okay. All right, now we're started. So, like I said, my name is Michael James. I'm a branch chief in the Office of Private Sector Exchange Administration, or we go by the acronym OPA. And we're in the division of the Educational and Cultural Affairs Bureau that administers the private sector run exchange programs by the sponsors that whose representatives you met during the summit this week. And so my team, we typically receive incident reports from sponsors, and we follow up on any complaints or concerns regarding exchange visitors while they're here on program. And we also conduct program monitoring. So part of that involves, it used to until this year, involve going out and conducting interviews with participants in person and learning how the program is functioning on the ground. This year we did that virtually by sending out a survey. This year we sent two surveys, one in late January for the winter season and one in late July for the summer season. So some of the data I'm going to present today are some of our observations from those surveys, and in comparing kind of pre-COVID and post-COVID. But I'm going to kick off with actually the numbers of, well, I'm going to kick off with the Bridge USA, and then I'll get into the numbers of how many were on program versus last year, 2019. So if you were on the welcome session yesterday morning, with Kevin Saba and Alicia Woodward and Matt Lusenhoff, you heard a lot about Bridge USA and the goals of the program. So I just wanted to reiterate that and why we chose the name Bridge USA. I know Bridges of Dordt County also uses Bridge, and I can't say we borrowed it from them, but Bridge just makes a great metaphor for the goals of this program. This program is supposed to provide an authentic experience to exchange visitors about, U.S. culture and being immersed in the local community and communities like yours where you're at in seasonal destinations. You guys really open your doors to them and provide that authentic experience and really immerse them. So that's really the goal of the Bridge USA program. And the logo says it all. It's, the star is the exchange visitor on their journey, which has no beginning or end. And it's about long-lasting connections that they form that will carry them into the future. So yesterday I said, there were about 6,000 on program during this past summer in 2020 and about 200 on program for this winter. In comparison to last year, or 2019, That was 90,000 in the summer and about 15,000 for the winter a year ago. And the big difference was that there were so many more participants on the program this summer who weren't supposed to be there. They were carryovers from the previous winter. They came in December, as early as December, even November, and they weren't able to get home. These are the Peruvians and the Argentinians, mainly. And then the Ecuadorians are those ones who arrived in February and March, right as things were starting to get heavy and the economy shut down. For the first time ever, the ECA Bureau had to offer to extend the programs of participants who were on program. That was not just summer travel, that was also other categories. But it allowed them to remain in good standing, while they were still here, trying to find a flight home as their home countries imposed border restrictions. So, so during the summer, we had as many as 6,000, but that was only 7% of the year prior. And if you didn't include those carried over from the winter, it was only 3% who arrived in the summer months. And you can see the breakdown of the countries, dramatic change from the previous year. Ecuador, number one, because they just arrived. But normally it would have been Russia, Turkey, Jamaica, and Romania, who would be at the top, like they were the year before. So this is a breakdown. I know it's a busy chart, but it answers two questions, which is which communities had the most, and how did that change from how many they had the year before? So you can see here that Wisconsin Dells, Cape Cod, Outer Banks, Sandusky, Ohio, those were the biggest locations for this past summer, but for last year, for the calendar year. So arrivals in 2020 as compared to arrivals in 2019. But what's really fascinating is that Wisconsin Dells actually became one of the top destination for those in 2020 who did make it on program, and increased from the year prior. A few other areas also saw big increases: Cape Cod, Outer Banks. But you can see the difference in the percentage here. The tall, dark blue line, shows you how much of the prior year they had, and then you can see the actual numbers below the bars. So I think the really interesting thing here is not only just how each community changed, but the fact is where community support groups have been active in the past is where most of the participants went in 2020. In 2019, only 40% were in community support group areas. In 2020, that increased to 74%. And I want to comment that I don't actually know why, I can't say for sure why participants move from one area to another. Sponsors can only answer that question, but as you've heard them talk about in the past, it's part participant choice. They're going where they've heard good things about the community in the past from their friends or relatives. And they're going, and sponsors also prefer, I think, in many cases, to put participants in areas where they have longstanding employer relationships. They know the housing is available. Maybe they have local representatives there and can provide that level of support, especially in a challenging year where participants needed it. So I just want to take a minute here to kind of show you how we kind of evaluate the program, right? We look at the data, we look at the participant responses, and we see, number one, are they having a good experience? Are they going home with a positive memory of the program? And then looking at the elements of the program. Some of the elements are just inherent to it. They've got, they come to have a job. They have to have a sponsor who supports them and assists when necessary. They have to have housing and a way of getting around to and from work or the area. But the program purpose is also, having opportunities to interact with Americans and experience the American culture into the regulations in the program purpose section. So, and then of course, they have to be safe. We want them to stay safe on program and go home healthy, happy, alive with good memories. So let me move on. Core measures. So this is kind of a breakdown. I just showed you what the measures are and how we define them. This is the breakdown of the survey findings for those measures. Now, we asked these questions, most of them in a 5-point scale, very dissatisfied to very satisfied. For most of these, a few of them are yes, no. So did they have opportunities to experience American culture, yes or no? Same with interacting with Americans, and then feeling safe on program. We actually asked if they felt unsafe during the program, but I inverted it so it's even with the other measures. But you can see there how many responded. And the biggest difference is here, the statistically significant differences are for summer, between summer and opportunities to experience American culture, more who didn't feel safe during the program, meaning fewer who felt safe, and then fewer opportunities to interact with Americans. Still pretty high on that level, of course, but like everyone else, they interacted with a smaller group of people and did fewer things. But I'll get more into that in a second. And the reason I'm not comparing this to 2019 survey, you may remember from the summit last year in Branson that I showed a similar graph, but we asked that year yes/no questions, and this is a 5-point scale, so it's hard to compare that when you have no like middle option with the yes/no response rate. So the impact of COVID-19 on the participant experience. You may be asking yourself that. I don't think you'll be surprised by the answer because it's what you'd expect. First off, those who, oh gosh, sorry, I'm not showing the screen anymore. But first off, the thing that they, excuse me one second. Well, I'll just keep talking while I wait for this to move. But the first thing is that, I already said, those who were here got stuck by the travel restrictions. Those who had just arrived, some of them, their employers shut down. So there were more in the summer who had said that they had left their primary job by the time in late July. And so here we are. And 2 out of 3 of those who were not at their primary job cited COVID's impact on the business. Of course, that's still saying that there were a fair number were still at their job, and that was I think there were still 80% who were still at their 85% who were still at their primary job. More who felt that they were less safe. Part of that was COVID. Guests and customers not taking precautionary measures. Part of that was also just the lack of safety in their commute and getting to and from work with the streets and lack of lights. More who dissatisfied with their sponsor, and a lot of that had to do with COVID because they were struggling and frustrated the potentially lack of relocation to jobs, financial assistance, extension requests. We handled some of those complaints and how that was and how the sponsor was adjusting. Fewer who had, I mentioned fewer had opportunities for cultural activities. But I think the thing that's important to note here is that those who did come on program this summer, it was a minor change in overall program satisfaction. It was 84% this year across all, the respondents, and for the summer. It was 86% in the winter, but from our in-person site visits, that's 85% is the average. So we're kind of right in line. I think probably that a lot had to do with getting the hours. Maybe it had to do with fewer people in the housing. The fact is, if they came here, I think they felt lucky to be here because of not the restriction on visas. But overall, what we wanted to know is, how many are people who are having a pretty good experience, and how many have experiences that need to be improved somehow, and how many are just, not having a good experience at all. So, this shows that a third of them are basically, no complaints across. These are not the only questions we asked, but when you look at just those core measures, A third have no complaints. Half are happy with the program, their experience, but still have some issues with some element of their program. And then the other 15, 16%, have a good number of complaints. And those are the ones I really wish, we want to dig into and work with the sponsors on improving their experience, because, we want everyone to go home satisfied with their program overall. What I'm showing here is, if you think about their program experience as a pie or a cake, then, what's the biggest factor in their overall program satisfaction? Well, it's probably no surprise that it's their job. It's what they came for. It's in the name of the program, and it's where they spend their most time. It's the people at their job or who they interact with the most during their program, and it's how they earn their money to experience the U.S. culture while they're here. So 44% of the of their program satisfaction is basically explained by their job, whether or not they're satisfied with their job. Behind that, sponsor satisfaction, and behind that, I'll get to in a second. But top obstacles to program experience, it's the high costs, limited options to get around. But the big thing, especially with job satisfaction, is, are they getting the hours that they expected? And that, if you think about it, is that, a rough estimate of how much money they spend on program to get here in fees, flights, living expenses, it's around $7,000, but varies widely. So don't quote me on that. But at an average rate of $10 an hour, they're going to have to work 42 hours a week every week for 16 weeks if they stay that long to recoup that, and that's before they can do things. So, hours is important because it's the means of earning wages to do other things than go home and go to work. So, so it's a big thing, and when they're able to get those hours, it definitely improves their view of what they're able to do, what they experience. But the other things that affect it are, are they having conflicts with their managers or their coworkers? Are they getting the opportunity to interact with others, especially if it's a job that doesn't require it? Housekeeper is one that comes under a lot of fire for that, but there are other jobs that you'd be surprised. We heard from game attendants who said that they didn't get as many opportunities to interact or to do cultural activities. Lifeguards, because it's not required to talk, but some do, many do. It's a widely variable experience, and the more opportunities that participants are given to interact, while they're at work, while they're outside of work, the more they're going to get out of the experience. But let me get to that third slice of the pie in overall program experience, and that's the answer to the question that we asked: is there anything you wish you knew before you arrived in the United States that your sponsor, employer, or local agency did not tell you? And when you compare that against the rates who said that they were satisfied with their overall program experience, you see what this chart shows, which is, if they knew what to expect and they got what they expected, they were very satisfied. If they didn't know what to expect, or if there was something that came up that they felt like they should have been told about, or they got something different from what they were told about, they were very dissatisfied. So it doesn't totally explain the whole experience, but it's a big part of it. Next question then you're probably asking yourself is, what do you wish you knew? So we asked them, if you said yes, then what was it? And you can kind of group the comments that we received. It was about, for summer, it was over 500 comments. We kind of condensed them down to these main four groups here. It's the housing, they wish they had gotten more details on the housing, actual pictures, not just glossy photos. And, so they knew what it actually looked like, what the real conditions were, who they're, how many people in the unit, and how long it's going to take them to get to the work site. And along those lines, the location, of where they're going to be living versus where they're going to be working, what's accessible, how are they going to be able to access activities or events in the area, especially if public transportation is somewhat limited. And then work schedule. The number of hours, I already talked about that, how it's important. It's not just because they're looking to earn as much money as possible, though some are. It's really a question of, is it what they were told they're going to get? Are there some unexplained reasons that they're not going to get those hours that nobody bothered to mention, or nobody, clearly explained before they arrived? And now they're learning, oh, wait, I'm not going to be able to get as many hours as I thought. And then, lastly, I think taxes really showed up, because I think that was something that was a bit surprising to me, that there was a lot of comments about, wishing to know what the tax system was all about. But it mainly came down to how much was going to be taken out of their paycheck. So it's part of that calculation of, how much am I actually going to be able to earn? How much am I able to do with the money I'm earning? How much of the money that was loaned to me by my family for this program am I going to be able to pay back? I'm framing it in a negative way. Maybe it seems that way to you. We're trying to identify the major issues in the program, and we want to turn that information back to the sponsors and other stakeholders, just to show, like, these are the kind of the things that we hear about. But let's talk about success. And I think one of the biggest successes is that for most participants, this does provide the cultural exchange experience that they ultimately are looking for. That's what they come here for. And I'm going to show you what we see from the last time we did in-person interviews, which was in 2019. We asked that question, why did you come on the program? What was the motivation here? And the majority said, I want to learn English. I want to improve my English. I want to experience a new culture, or I want to experience US culture. A total of 170 comments mentioned specifically US culture. That's why they're here. They wanted a chance to travel, meet new people, make friends. And that's why interaction and opportunities for interaction is a big deal. Sure, a few of them said they wanted to come and earn money, but it's not that many compared, if you just take a sample and you ask them. A lot of it also has to do with, learning to be on their own, getting a chance to be on their own. And, in some cases, they're gaining experience for their career, but they're also just learning to be adults and gaining experience. So it's that's what I appreciate seeing this. And I think the other thing that goes overlooked is that participants want to share their culture too. I've talked to a few participants who are really glad when they got to explain to Americans where they come from. If they come from Jordan, if they come from Australia. There's a comment from an Australian who said that in the survey, that she really appreciated being able to teach Americans about her country. So I did want to take a moment here to talk about safety, because in past years, it's been a big focus of some communities. And I think this year, more than others for me, really highlighted why that's important. Unfortunately, every year there are collisions where participants are struck by a car, there's an accident. Most of them are walking or biking, up to 30 minutes to get to their job, each way. And some in the past have died, and it's been every time a tragedy. This year, there's so many fewer participants. You thought, the odds must be lower, right? It still happened. So this is, the location as described on the police report. Two participants were on their way to work, 7 a.m, biking on the shoulder there. You can see the size of the shoulder. And a car veered over and struck them. And one died hours later from her head trauma. And I know the sponsor provided materials, orientation materials that talked about bike safety and reminded them to wear a helmet. I don't know why. No one will know why she wasn't wearing a helmet, unfortunately. But anyway, so that's why I think every action that you're taking to improve bike safety, to improve safety on the roads, to do helmet giveaways and raffles and bike light giveaways is still very, very important. And hopefully in the end effective. So, we've heard a lot this week, yesterday and today, about what sponsors and host employers are planning for, but also what communities have done in the past year to support the participants and to help them in time of need. I was listening to the the employer panel yesterday, listening to employers talking about like wanting to support them when they were suddenly, left in a very tough situation. And how communities really, turned to the communities to help do that. I think that was in Myrtle Beach, and this is a photo that I received from Kathy Winfrey who, among other volunteers at the Seacoast Vineyard Church's All Nations Cafe, got together and did rounds of visits to 14 houses and delivered some groceries to some of them. Myrtle Beach actually, I think, for the most part, stayed fairly open throughout a lot of the pandemic, especially early in the summer. But it was really nice of these volunteers to check in, and I know there are other similar examples in places like Gatlinburg, which conducted, where the Nations for Christ conducted more activities throughout the summer. Virginia Beach Community Chapel conducted outdoor meals for hundreds, well, not hundreds, but many participants, many fewer than they did last year, or previous years. But it's just really nice that community members did what they could and did what they wanted to, despite the risks. Although it was certainly understandable when volunteers, given health risk, could not. And I think participants really appreciated the efforts that employers made to help them, that, with extra hours and time and housing, and that volunteers made to, still engage them in their community. And these are just 3 comments from the survey, some of the positive comments that we received that I thought would be great to show you. And I think what comes through here is that they appreciated the opportunities to meet other people and to engage in what they experienced in the level of care from others while they were here. So if I've got my suggestions here, my recommendations on having the most successful program from drawing on these observations that I've just talked to you about, it really comes down to these kind of 5 things for me. Making sure they're informed of all the details of what to expect, and also making sure that what you've informed them of is what happens when they're on the ground. And I think that will go a long way towards their positive memories of their time on program. But you also should make sure to, if you're in a position to diversify who they work with, what teams they work in, you should definitely work to maximize their interaction by mixing up the teams, and by multiple countries, or with Americans, or if they typically work on them alone, trying to rotate them into other positions. You could also do that through staff activities, or if you're a community group and you're looking to mix them up, any way that you can get them to interact with a diverse group of folks, that's the way to do it. And they will appreciate the opportunity to meet people, because that's part of why they come. And if you're a host employer and it's really important to make sure that they're treated equally, because one of the things we're monitoring is a number of participants who expressed experiencing some form of discrimination. And a lot of times it's really vague, and it's hard to tell if it was perceived, or was it intentional by the other person. A lot of times it seems to indicate being treated differently based on either being a foreigner or being or even with different countries. One country seems to be preferred over another, and but it also goes for the other dimensions of sex and gender and orientation and race, ethnicity. So they're going to pick up on any perceived differences, but they're also going to remember managers who treat them fairly. I mean, they've got a job to do, but if you treat them fairly and respectfully, they're going to remember that too as a good manager. And make sure to include them, include Americans with them in activities. One thing that maybe you could look at if you're an employer, if you're a housing provider, you've got space this year because there's fewer this year. We don't know how many are going to be able to come on program. It's still a big unknown, but if you've got space and you're working hard to recruit locally, but maybe also from outside your area, that is not a benefit that could be offered to Americans outside the area as a recruiting tool. And the more Americans that are in the housing with the exchange visitors, the more interaction. The more it's maximized, the more we're going to see participants who have really had a chance to get to know American culture and go home feeling like they got the experience they were looking for. And lastly, you can really enhance the cultural component of this program with exposure through various activities. There's been some great examples when I was in the networking session earlier of what people have been trying to do, keeping distances, outside activities. Participants did all kinds of activities this year from what they reported to us in the survey. It almost looked like a normal summer, although I hope that social distancing and masks were used during those activities, hopefully. But in any case, there's room here to enhance the cultural component with more activities, with virtual activities, creative ways that Tanya and Haldis were talking about just an hour ago. And another idea here is connecting them with professionals in their fields. So these students, as you know, they don't just come here to work in the hospitality industry. Oftentimes they're studying law, political science, biology, computer engineering, business. Maybe they're studying to be English teachers. And if you are looking for an activity that is smaller in scale, but it also provides long-lasting connections, that is maybe arranging them to meet with, even virtually, professionals in their field of study. And I'm actually going to offer an example that we learned about that the embassy in Bratislava, Slovakia did. Actually, this was in 2019. But what they did was they decided to they noticed a number of police cadets on the summer travel program as they were processing visas, and decided, hey, let's connect them with law enforcement in the United States where they're going. And so they did that for I think maybe 20 or so participants. I mean, a very small scale effort here, but they got a chance to do ride-alongs. They got a chance to meet with officers, learn how United States police officers operate, and took that experience home with them. That's just while they were working in restaurants or kitchens or hotels. So that's another way that I propose to you. And I know Wisconsin Dells had talked about doing kind of a pilot program with that for that. And I know Stacy Tollickson could also provide some more examples on how that worked out. Maybe that was kind of put on hold, but that's those are great examples. So for me, I'm going to wrap up now with this slide. I mean, we've talked a lot about what to do. Well, you guys have been talking about it. The sponsors and host employers and community members have been talking about this. And so I don't really have much more to add. The big things here are, just making sure that they're not displacing Americans, that employers are rehiring anybody who's furloughed. Have a contingency plan. Make sure to enforce CDC recommendations and have the ability to isolate and contain any potential infections. I know employers are focused on that to prevent it from impacting their business. Making sure to inform them of the risks and to be ready in case they do have to be out of work, but also making sure that they're supported if they do have to be out of work for a period of time. So, if they're not following the safeguards, we support, taking a hard stance. It's everybody's health and safety as well. So, and then just continue to communicate quickly. I mean, you guys, everyone who's been attending this session is really, you're focused on communicating and getting to know who the other stakeholders are. So, that so far has been very helpful with the program. in keeping it, keeping it as successful as it's been so far. So I can only encourage you all to continue doing that. So with that, I'm going to end my portion of it and turn it over to David Benzie, and I'll let him introduce himself. But before I go, I just want to say thank you. And I mean, this has been a huge deal to have this summit, to have so many people on this this video conference for the past 2 days. I think every session has had 150 to 250 people joining. So it's amazing what the size of this community is. So I'll stop talking and turn it over to David.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you everybody for this opportunity to talk with you today. When Mike and I were talking about this, I guess a long time ago, I had actually been out to Park City in the winter of 2019 and was blown away by the work that community had done. And then Mike sort of walked me through all the great work that many of these community support groups are doing. So I was like, the next community support group that you have, Summit, please, I would love the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing with alumni and some of the things that I've seen by going out to community groups. I'm struck because I know that yesterday, Matt Lucenhop, who's the acting assistant secretary, Alicia Woodward, and Kevin Saba, our acting DAS and my office director, spoke with you, and then listening to Mike's presentation just now, and I would like to think that we're so finely tuned that we've our presentations fold in nicely one to the other. It's not that I just saw what Alicia said or Matt said or Kevin, but then just listening, I realize how integrated our work is with each of our offices, with our bureau, with the department, but with the communities and with the sponsors. Honestly, we couldn't do this. First and foremost, I think 90% of, maybe more, of what our private sector exchange office does is the health, safety, welfare. And we don't get to discuss alumni engagement and how it can strengthen programs and sustain the programs if we all don't get the health, safety, welfare right. And that'll become clear. Mike, you can go to the second slide. A little bit about how do our programs support ECA's mission? It would be nice to think that we do the programs because you feel good about them, because they're nice to have these exchange opportunities. But we're really driving at a foreign policy mission. And truly, it's that connecting people, the people to say mutual understanding, people to people engagement, trying to get people to understand our culture better, allowing us to understand others better. I'm always struck by the fact that it was Edward R. Murrow who reiterated that it's connecting the last 3 feet. I mean, that is what you are doing every day that somebody is with you and on a program, because these folks are interacting with Americans, with each other, in an unvarnished atmosphere where they can see us warts and all. I think that's something I heard early in my career, is that when we do things, we should not be afraid to say, this is where we fall short, but we're always trying to improve. One of the things you'll notice about Bridge USA programs, and specifically Summer Work Travel, is they're targeting young people, and that's on purpose. These in today's world, it's misinformation and disinformation is a lot of what we're dealing with. A lot of these young people are coming from countries where they haven't learned how to sort of read through media. I suspect our country is also struggles with that as well these days. Just too much information. Perhaps in the Cold War it was limited information, and now today it's too much information. And how do you get quality information out? So by engaging these young people, we're helping them sort of to gain the tools and not be so vulnerable to maybe anti-American sentiment that might exist. We also target young people because the countries that they come from, populations are often young, and that's the demographic, and so therefore we're trying to target them. I think most importantly, you know, we realize that with these participants out in the community, there's no better way to tell the American story than having Americans working side by side or visiting with them and talking to them directly, unfiltered. There's no government minder. There's no big brother. We're not telling people what to say. And so people can take away, I think, an honest assessment of what we're about. I mean, truly, at the end of the day, you know, the Bridge USA programs are, I would argue, one of the most cost-effective soft power programs we have going. You'll see on this slide, you know, why is engagement essential to what we're trying to do? Part of it is it strengthens the program. You know, if we have alumni having good programs, experiencing good programs, they leave feeling a part of something. They feel, I think, you know, I don't know, perhaps during one of the sessions, if somebody explained Bridge USA, I know Mike did at the beginning of his session, but I think that was truly the effort behind the branding, which was we want our participants to leave knowing that they were part of something. They weren't just J visa, you know, that's just a consular notation for what type of visa you came on to come to the U.S. And I think, you know, I was the idea of being able to talk about Bridge USA allows us to strengthen the program and make these alumni feel like they're part of something. It sustains the program. You know, when we share these alumni stories, you know, we share them with you. I know that sponsors and community groups have shared them with us, to Lynette. We try to broadcast them, but we're also sharing them internally. We're sharing them with our leadership. We're sharing them on the Hill with legislative leaders. The last, you know, bit of time, the last number of years, the program has been under scrutiny, you know, and questions of its value. And I think by being able to talk about this is the influence, the impact, allows us to get past people who might have, oh, it's just a labor program. If somebody who says that has never sat down and had a conversation with these young people about what this program means to them and what they've done as a result of it, and how perhaps going forward they're good contacts for the United States to have as we deal with other issues abroad. And that ties into the achieving the public diplomacy goals. It's a soft power program. It allows people to connect, and having a long-term relationship with these alumni allows us to see how much the program influenced their life and perception of the U.S. Mike, if you can go to the next slide. I'm sure you've seen this. I have actually, around the office, I affectionately call this the SABA hierarchy of exchange visitors' needs. But I think it truly captures, if we build the foundation, the zero incident culture, the safe and affordable housing, integration of activities, new skills, learning English, learning job skills. I've heard plenty of I've met with plenty of alumni who said that was the first time I've been by myself. I had to learn how to, you know, wash my own clothes, prepare my own food, balance my own checking account. You know, my parents weren't around. If all of us together collectively do our job well, we get to the point where we've actually actualized citizen ambassadors, young people who will return home, perhaps even while they're here, and share the excitement that they have for their programs. And when they're home and somebody says something, perhaps about American culture or the American system, we'll be able to explain it in a more nuanced way. I was having a conversation earlier this week, and they were talking about folks in Europe were so interested in what was happening in the U.S. because they just couldn't understand our political culture. so having these young people up close and personal, we know that they're educated, they're going to college, they're able to actually, in their own words, explain what's going on. Next slide, Mike. So citizen ambassadors, if we do it right, they're going to share this understanding of American values with their friends. And I mentioned social media. I was talking with an embassy earlier this week, and they said, when these summer travel participants are there, we ought to tag us in their social media posts back to their friends, because it's truly showing the impact while it's happening, and it's building demand from their friends to also go on these programs. And I know the sponsors have probably seen this when they recruit good programs. People go back, talk about their good experience. It makes it easier to recruit for next one. One of the things that we're trying to do a better job of is actually identify and connect with alumni and continue the cultivation. Again, we know from the alumni we've run into that they've started businesses, that they've gone on to key professional fields. Some have even entered into parliament or their governments, which is, the absolute gold standard of how, when we look at alumni of ECA funded programs, that we say, oh, this person became head of state, this person became prime minister, is where we really sort of measure our impact. Additionally, I know Das Woodward, or our acting principal deputy Woodward, she probably, I apologize, I missed her presentation yesterday, but I'm certain that she used similar remarks to another presentation I had gone to, where she really ties together sort of why these programs are important to our embassies. And she has many experiences from her time in Ireland or South Korea, where she can point to why these things are important, addressing national security issues, issues of increasing U.S. leadership in these countries, fostering economic opportunity, addressing inequality, even educating folks on the value of volunteerism or disability rights, which we saw in Lithuania. Next slide, Mike. Thank you. I guess the question becomes, how do we engage with alumni? We have 300,000 alumni who come, this is everything I refer to as pre-pandemic. The pandemic has really changed how we speak, but 300,000 come every year. So we really have an embarrassment of alumni. What we're really trying to figure out is, how do you drill down into that barrel, if you will, of opportunity, and really find those motivated alumni who really want to maintain a relationship with the United States? How do we stay connected to them? How do we get them involved with our embassies, on a more regular basis? One of the ways that we do it is working with sponsors and community support groups. This partnership, we're looking for names or individuals who have had successful programs. Again, it gets back to, if we have those hierarchy of exchange visitor needs met, and the health, safety, welfare first and foremost is taken care of, we can actually move to engaging alumni and actually looking to talk with them about how do we build a better relationship. All of it supports the foundation of building up to this, and because of this, as I noted, we're looking to identify who these participants are. Another way, and that's where, honestly, where sponsors and support groups are very helpful, when you flag interesting participant stories for us, or you hear of somebody that you maintained a relationship with after they've gone home, and you share those stories with us, we can then look to amplify them. We can amplify them, as I said, internally within ECA, but we can also share them with our embassy contacts and say to an officer at the U.S. Embassy, we think it'd be really valuable for you to meet this individual. Here, let me tell you the story of what they've done. And that gets me to what's another way that we're looking to engage alumni and that's through our embassies. Historically, the embassies don't really know who the Bridge USA participants are. And the reason that they don't is because of the way people come on the program. A sponsor goes out, works with a local agent, perhaps. The only time they'll come through the embassy is for their visa interview. So our consular office, if you talk to any consular officer or any officer in the Department of State who did a consular rotation, they all know the J visa programs. And sometimes we are having to do a bit of our own re-education, if you will, to say, hey, I know you saw some issues on the visa line, but let me really tell you about the public diplomacy value of these programs and these alumni. So I spend a lot of my time trying to raise awareness of the public diplomacy value of the program, showing the embassy, hey, you want to do a program on economic empowerment, you can do that through a scholars program. You could do that through another sort of engagement, perhaps an internship or training program if somebody was in that vein. Then what we're trying to do is identify, again, alumni that we can share with them so they can conduct outreach. One of the things that I would make available, there's places called American Spaces or American Corners. These are they vary, but in some places they are meeting rooms in buildings like public libraries outside of the embassy. And they are there so that embassy officers can have a space to go out and engage people so that everybody doesn't have to go through rigorous security to come into the embassy to talk to somebody. So they'll engage. These libraries or spaces may be at a public university or a public library, like I said, and they will go out there. You are also able to utilize those spaces. So if you're traveling somewhere and you wanted to know if there is an American space where you could host a pre-departure briefing or an alumni roundtable or otherwise engage with some participants or alumni, you can let me know. I can find out from the embassy if there is, and we can try and set that up as a programming space that you could utilize. We also would encourage using alumni in job fairs. And then also I've worked with some sponsors who have let me know when they're going to be out, doing job fairs. I'll share those job fair opportunities with the embassies to say, here's a job fair. This is what it is. This is where it is. It'd be great if you wanted to come. You don't have to come for the whole 2 days. You can come for an hour. You could address the students from the stage, talk about, the issues of how to get a visa. But you could also take time. My sell to the embassy officers is you can take time to meet alumni, hear about their programs, meet young people who are excited to go on these programs, and in certain cases, talk to host employers who are out there doing interviews to hear more about how this benefits American communities, perhaps some where they grew up, and they may not have realized that this program was even in their hometowns. So the one thing I will say, in all fairness, is that I'm always willing to try and approach the embassy and get them interested and to come out. I can't guarantee that they'll always be interested, but I do think it's, when possible, it's worth trying. Another way is ECA runs the International Exchange Alumni website, IEA for short. In 2014, we were invited to start adding Bridge USA participants. We started very small, 10% of Summer Work Travel participants were invited to see if it would work. And Mike, I think you can jump to the next slide. I think that might help. It might be a visual, if not. Did Mike go to sleep on me? Anyway,
sorry.
So it's all good.
It's paused. I'm trying to resume it.
No worries. So we started with no Bridge USA alumni in ECA's alumni website. So in 2014, we started at 0. We are now able to every year to take all 300,000 participants and extend to them an invitation to join ECA's alumni website. From that, website, there's access to materials, periodicals, resources, ways to connect with other alumni, to find out if there's an alumni association in a country where these folks are. So it's a very dynamic and interactive networking site. They're actually looking at their next step is to actually look at creating an app, a phone app of sorts that participants could use before they departed, while they were in the States, and when they returned home. So there would be a much easier way for all of us to communicate with participants and alumni while they're on the program and when they returned home. To give you a sense of we've been successful, we actually have about 17 networks that have been set up in foreign countries by alumni, and they may be alumni of a specific sponsor who has done something in other places like Macedonia, Lithuania, Ghana. They have been supported and set up and are now inviting all J1 Bridge USA alumni to join. Again, as I mentioned, I'm really trying to raise awareness and share this alumni information with our embassy so that they can start to tap into it as a resource. When I travel, I often hold alumni roundtables. I've done that in London, in Edinburgh, in Lisbon, and that basically I would go to a sponsor and say, "I'm meeting with the embassy. Do you have any interesting alumni, influential alumni in City X?" Where I'll be. And then we usually go into the embassy and have a nice roundtable where we talk about the value of the program and really bring Bridge USA programs to life for the embassy so they can see it. There's a slide with probably about 4 or 5 photos that really show some of the alumni work that's going on. In Lithuania, we started an executive board of alums who created their own logo, social media site, and then they volunteered or they participated in the embassy's 4th of July activities, and they actually were the largest volunteer group at the Vilnius Marathon back in September. They manned water stations. If any of you are familiar with the New York City Marathon, that's what it was modeled on, and it was a very successful effort to allow alumni to participate, to connect with one another, to connect with the embassy, and to participate in a volunteer event. One of the additional things to that was amazing. They had the Lithuanian Paralympic goalball team there. So these were blind athletes, and they were talking about the power of coming to the States on programs, participating in Paralympic Games, and noting how through these efforts, they were actually able to raise awareness within Lithuania about things that we are now taking for granted, like sidewalks and traffic, crossing lights and things like that for our disabled to be able to get around, and they were able to start to raise awareness and start to implement some of these ideas. Slovakia, there's one photo. The ambassador is actually serving hamburgers at a pre-departure briefing for Summer Work Travel participants. It's something they do there every year. They have media. Slovakia is a big supporter of Summer Work Travel, that particular program. Macedonia's group, which is freestanding, it operates independently of the embassy. That alumni network actually has a startup academy where participants or alumni will come in and pitch business ideas, and then they'll launch them. Czech Republic alumni have done junior achievement. If any of you did junior achievement like I did back in middle school, this idea, and high school as well, but learning entrepreneurial techniques. They were teaching these about 8 seminars over the course of a several month period. And the students were then, the high school students in the Czech Republic were going out and actually trying these techniques or entrepreneurial skills that they had learned through these 8 seminars. Finally, I'll leave you with maybe a few ideas to think about, much like Mike did, for how we can engage alumni and partner together. Again, job fairs, trying to get the embassy to come out, including alumni and job fairs, has been something that we've had some success with. If you have pre-departure briefings, inviting folks to come out and talk about what to expect when they arrive in the States is also nice as well. Or if people have returned, we did this with one of the au pair organizations in Germany. They had both a pre-departure alumni event tied together. The mayor of the small town was there. We were able to get the consul, the CG, the consul general, to come out. And the feedback we got from the consulate was, this was incredible. We were so happy to meet these people. We really want to stay in touch with them and figure out ways to continue to interact. One of the ones, a really a big idea that I think could work, and it supports other aspects of ECA's work, is when I was in Park City and you had these 700 foreign students there for the welcome night, I was thinking how great it would have been to have local universities present to talk about how does one study in the States, study at any of the Utah universities, whether that's community college or come back for your master's degree or something like that. Because the students have already taken that first hurdle of coming to the States and overcoming that. How do I do this? And part of what ECA is trying to do is really encourage study in the U.S. And the summer work travel participants are there's my photos. Thank you, Mike. The having just local universities come out and talk about their schools, whether it's generally or very specifically, I think would be a nice, it would benefit other ECA program goals. I also know from talking to Mike that many of you travel and you run it to visit with alumni, former participants that you've stayed in touch with. Those are always nice stories, and it would be nice to perhaps share them with the embassy. Again, some may be interested and others may not. It may just depend on the individual and what they're doing. But it's always nice to at least share those stories. So that's, I guess in a nutshell, that's, if it wasn't, if I leave you with anything, if it wasn't for the great work that everybody is doing on that hierarchy of exchange visitor needs, none of the alumni stuff could happen. And because we're getting such good feedback on the surveys, because we are making more of an effort to connect and find these people, we're finding more and more opportunities to be relevant within our own bureau, and we're also becoming relevant to our embassies because they're starting to see the value that this program has for them, and that can only help in future years when somebody else decides that the program is not useful or not valuable. If the more people that are pushing with personal experiences within the department makes it easier to argue against that. Anyways, I know we have
David. I did have one question that I wanted to relate to you from one of the audience. Question from a sponsor is: what can sponsors do to further assist with educating embassies?
So probably what I think a sponsor finds is if they go individually and they visit an embassy, there's probably some, I don't want to call it resistance, but maybe some skepticism. Perhaps because the embassy might say, okay, this is a J1 visa, so it must be a consular issue. For those of you who aren't too familiar with the embassy structure, there's a public affairs section, and that's the unit that is primarily focused on foreign outreach. Their job is to engage foreign audiences in that country. Those officers don't often know about this program. So when you call upon the embassy, they see you in a consular contact, because how come my participants can't get visas? And so it's how can they talk? You have to think of what are you bringing to the table that these for these embassies. I know this sounds transactional, but you have to sort of explain it in terms of what's in it for me. So by saying I have two or three alumni, one started a business, one's at a university, he's a professor, and she's doing a volunteer group or doing some women's empowerment. I'm in town. I'd like to introduce them. If you go in like that, that's now you have something to share. You're not asking for answers to why are you getting so many visa denials. One of the ways I know, someone had told me years ago, I believe it was the Alliance, perhaps, used to actually have almost like a group that would go out and approach the embassies and talk about the program and its public diplomacy value in that language, without sort of wanting to discuss visa denials and that sort of thing. So perhaps if there was some way to go as a group, or address them that way, if there was a country that people really wanted to get to engage because of alums and because they were active there, sometimes offering it that way, so it's not seen as company X is trying to establish a commercial relationship that I can get help. I don't know if I've been very clear, but that's it's sort of the way you approach the embassy and which section you're trying to actually talk to.
That makes sense. Is there a good way to contact you if
people can just drop me an email?
You could help. Yeah.
I don't know if my email was on the slides. If people want it, there it is. Thank you. Yeah. See, questions.
BenziDK at state.gov.
Yeah. I mean, right now it's tough. I mean, our embassies are struggling to open up to have any kind of footprint. I don't know if anybody's discussed it, but the department has a phased approach to reopening: phase 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe 1, 2, 3. I've seen, I don't even know if there's any embassy in phase 3, which would be like normal operations. I think, through the fall and this early winter, I think we've had a regression back to phase 1. So visa interviews and such are, it's just tough. I mean, it depends on the rules or regulations of a country right now for how much social interaction can take place. So let's jump ahead and say, coming out of the pandemic, what could we do? Well, then that's a situation where, you're starting to travel again. You're starting to get out there. That's where I think we can talk and figure out ways to at least make the embassy aware of your visit, of your alumni, and your presence.
Well, thank you. I think we're definitely over, so I appreciate everyone who's stuck with us and to listen in on this. So thank you very much. There was one other question I wanted to answer, going back to what I was presenting on the 2020 survey. Did that go out to active participants from Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, those who were extended? We sent it out to whoever was still on program. At the time in late July. So actually a number of people had already gone home, but they were still active in CVIS. So that was our guide. But well, thank you guys, everyone, for sticking with us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Clay for kind of our closing remarks.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, David, for this great information and insight into Bridge USA's programs and alumni engagement. And thank you all for attending our Community Support Group Summit and on the Summer Travel Program over the last 2 days. A lot of great information has been shared, and I'd like to note that if any attendee is interested in connecting with any of the speakers for more information, please reach out to csgj1info@gmail.com, the same email address you all got your invites from, and we'll be happy to put you in touch if we're able to. Many folks have asked for copies of the presentations that were shared, and we will be sharing a folder with each presentation that is shareable within the next few days in a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the event. As Dan Bullock said earlier today, and I think it's very fitting for right now, a rising tide lifts all boats. Making the summer work travel program a success takes the whole exchange community and each stakeholder involved, from volunteers who host welcome events to chambers of commerce and municipal leaders, visa sponsors, housing providers, host employers, and the general public. Connecting with one another to share ideas does not only happen on a national stage, it also happens locally within each community as well. Many communities host yearly or even monthly stakeholder community support group meetings. This is great and really helps to rally support from various community stakeholders. Visa sponsors and the U.S. Department of State are always excited to join these discussions as well. And I've been to many myself, and thank each host community for inviting us. As a community member or stakeholder, if you're interested in hosting a conversation with other stakeholders about addressing challenges or discussing what can be done to grow the program within the community, please reach out, and the visa sponsor community would be more than happy to assist, take part in these conversations, and to connect you with the right people. We're looking forward to our upcoming 2021 summer season and really appreciate all of the hard work and dedication that each and every one of you has put in to make this program safe and successful, furthering our country's public diplomacy goals. I would also like to give a shout out to all of the presenters, panelists, and members from the planning committee for lending their efforts and expertise over the last few days. And with that, thank you all for attending, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person again soon. Have a great evening.